Good afternoon and welcome to our daily support call. Today we're actually really fortunate. We have a good friend of mine and head of partnership over at teamwork.com, Ryan Mesches. Ryan, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Absolutely. My name's Ryan. I'm responsible for our end-to-end partner strategy here in Teamwork, focused with working with people like Marcus and How To Project out in the ecosystem, enabling our customers and end users. So that's pretty much what I'm focused on myself in very short terms.
Right. And how long have you been in that role there with Teamwork?
Almost 2 years, actually, coming up on 2 years this day next month. So, wow.
Right. So awesome. And that opens that up to us a great conversation.
Of course.
Ryan's been working with Teamwork for 2 years. I was just thinking about this. I'm now going into year 12 working with Teamwork. Isn't that crazy?
And we're only 13 years old, so that's quite
Exactly. Yeah.
quite the timeline.
So watching the evolution of a company that started with about two guys and now you're over 200, it's just
Yeah.
amazing to see that kind of growth. And it's through initiatives like this with partnerships. So before we get into everything that's going on in the world and going on today, let's talk about even because in a way there was a need at Teamwork for leveraging partners better, for creating some type of structure, some type of system, because there was a huge need. And you stepped in, and let's talk about what the last 2 years has been like for you, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I suppose it's been quite the whirlwind, right? I joined Teamwork as kind of the first person to really come in and take on the partnership strategy, really build the foundation end to end, right? So, I mean, you know most of this, but really the idea was to come in and we realized that a lot of our customers were also really good potential partners. And so the first thing I did was I talked to people who we used to call kind of experts, like certified customers of ours. You were one of them, Marcus. And so I went out to a lot of them, tried to understand exactly what partnership meant to them and what it could mean to us, and really built a program of 3 core pillars. So it was sales partners, enablement partners, and technology partners. Sales partners are all about kind of driving the value and driving some of the revenue. They have access to end customers that we usually might not be able to get in touch with. Enablement partners and technology partners have very similar threads, but enablement partners really offer training, onboarding, implementation services, really working with our customers. And then we work with our enablement partners as well to make sure that we're on the same page, right? We're really working with each other as partners. And then technology partners are usually enablement partners as well. However, they have an expertise in API development, maybe have worked with some of our strategic integrations providers. And so they can create custom integrations, custom deployments, and custom work on top of, say, what Teamwork offers as a product company.
Right, and that's primarily our pillar has been enablement, but we also, to your point, yeah, we have had to do some custom implementations as well, leveraging the API and webhooks. So yeah, it's a very robust landscape, Teamwork. It's changed a lot over the years. There's been more product offerings. There's an entire suite now, takes care of your customer support needs, your internal communication needs. There's even a sales pipeline tool in there, and now a document repository in addition to everything else that already exists inside of the core Teamwork product. So it's been really interesting to say how it's stayed in its wheelhouse and yet continued to identify niches that are all relevant to the topic of today, which of course is distributed teams and remote working. I mean, you know, I've been working with some Teamwork customers over the last few weeks, and it's fascinating because they're like, hey, can you do Slack integrations? And it's like, yeah, of course, Slack integrates directly with Teamwork. Or what about, you know, this chat tool we use or that tool we use? And I'm like, you do realize you have Teamwork chat integrated into your projects by default, right? And it's amazing how many people don't know about something like that. And they're not looking for the big bells and whistles necessarily of video conferencing like what we're doing. They're just looking for a quick way to type away to each other throughout the workday. And when you show them some of the really relevant features, like, you know, being able to create tasks right out of a chat window and things like that, we've been really implementing a lot of the tools that were already there for people, which is kind of fun. Same thing with Teamwork Desk. People don't realize that the little hamburger menu at the top of Teamwork itself gives you access to the other platforms that you can quickly sign on for, because obviously a lot of businesses are seeing a huge influx in the customer service need. So we've been doing some teamwork desk work as well, setting up a lot of automated responses, getting agents set up properly so we know which customers go to who and all that kind of stuff. So I'll be honest with you, I have never had to test the suite, the teamwork suite, to scale so quickly, and it hasn't failed me at all. So I've been really, really impressed, as always, with how solid and how usable the platform is. So I'm saying that now, not simply because I am, the oldest partner in the program, and this is what we do as part of our primary business, but I've used all the different platforms. And this, we talk about this, everything from Bittrex to Asana to Monday to, SharePoint to everything that's out there. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And as long as you're doing something right now to enable your remote teams, kudos to you. But the only sell I'm going to give today is that if you really want something that's robust, dependable, keeps everything secure the way it's supposed to, has redundant servers worldwide, bar none, the best customer support you're ever going to find, then you really need to give teamwork a try. So that's the only sunshine and rainbows.
That's a better pitch than I could give, Marcus. Appreciate that.
Well, no problem at all. But let's get down to again, what's been going on. We've had a huge shift in the world. And you and I, of course, being in this industry, working from home is nothing new. I've been doing it on and off for the last 22 years. The technology just gets better and better. The offerings get better and better. But right now we're seeing an unprecedented need to set up distributed teams or increase distributed teams. So first of all, at a high level, with your expertise, having worked with partners, working in an environment like this, what have you seen to be the key challenges for business during this transition?
I think really for me, and that's a really good question, one of the key challenges of staying connected is really the communication piece, right? So, I mean, you mentioned some of the things that we do as teamwork and how our tools enable communication, but we're using a tool right now that enables great communication as well. Really, the core fundamental bit is talking to each other, right? And that's a challenge if you're used to turning to the guy sitting beside you and saying, hey, what's up? What's next, right? And so I myself do work remotely, right? You see, I'm in my home office, right? That's a luxury in these days. Not everybody has that. So that's also a challenge with the space and working with children as well. Luckily, my son is locked out of this room for right now. But it's a challenge there too. But at the core, it's really about connecting and communicating with people, right? And so if you are used to running around the office and grabbing somebody and talking to them, that's I've seen as a challenge. Probably, and you kind of alluded to this with partners specifically, what I found really interesting is a lot of our partners are thriving because a lot of them are small enough organizations between say 5 and maybe 25 employees who are focused on enabling communication and collaboration at scale, right? So they work with our end customers to help those customers really grow and communicate and collaborate. And so many of them, we have a partner, for example, in Israel who actually use teamwork to move their team from 4 days in the office, 1 day remote, and flipped it. And they did this 6 months ago, right? Just with teamwork. And so great to see that happen. I know you have kind of a similar experience yourself. It's always good to kind of get out of the office. And so they've been used to it. They've been used to working on remote calls. For example, I know you have customers across North America of ours and our joint customers. So it's not really new. However, what I think has been a big one and big personal one for me really is, wife and kid being home, right? And normally when you're remote working or working from home, you're in a distraction-free environment, and that's not the case now. So, working within in that confined space, is something to deal with.
It is. So you brought up some good points. So let's unpack a bit of this together. So the first thing we talked about is, working from home is nothing new, but there's more of a demand for it than I've ever seen in history, really. And you were talking about, some of the different challenges, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm so glad to hear that other partners are thriving as well. It's almost in a way you feel a little bit of guilt. Well, I won't say you, I feel a little bit of guilt because, it felt for the longest time like we were just preaching from the mountains and no one was listening. It was a luxury, not a necessity. And then overnight that changed and we can't keep up. So it's really quite fascinating. What I was going to talk about though is you mentioned communication. And I want to say this because it applies to teamwork. Teamwork is a platform. Teamwork is a set of tools. And systems are wonderful. Like, it's important to have systems, but if you don't have a culture with that, if you don't have processes with that, then the tool is useless. And a lot of times throughout the history of our business, and you've seen it, I see you nodding,
Yep.
people come to you because they want that easy fix. They're like, hey, will your tool, will it make everything magically better in our workplace? And the answer is no. There's no tool that can do that. It's not about just getting everybody on a tool. It's about making sure the tool fits your processes. And if you don't have processes, if you don't have meeting rhythms, and if you don't have how we communicate with each other already established, and you're thrown into an environment like what we're seeing right now, not only do you have to deal with the systems and the tools, but now you have to figure out how to create a remote work culture and do those two things really, really quickly. So I love that you touched on that part. That's critical. You guys recently, well, I guess that's not recent anymore, but in the near past, you went through EOS, which is the Entrepreneur Operating System. And that is such a thing. It's a standardized process that everyone buys into. And once you buy into the process, then you figure out how the tools fit into that piece. Let's talk about that. That was a year and a half ago now, wasn't it, when you first came in?
It was actually just before I came in is when they were kind of kicking the tires on it. And our kind of operations lead at that time really went out to market to understand, look, we know we have a problem. How do we fix it? I think at that point we were maybe 125, maybe 150 employees, operating in silos a little bit, different product teams. We only had 3 products at that time, and now we have 5. And we realized we needed a foundation for growth, and that's what EOS became for us. So for us, it was interesting. I came from a background working many years in Microsoft, so they ingrained that into you from day one: the process, the procedures, how to book a meeting, how to just common core functional things. And then you realize when you come into a growing company, that doesn't just come from nowhere, right? So EOS became the heart or the center of that for us. So really, for each kind of team took, I mean, there's a process of like weekly meetings, level 10s they're called, and that's really how individuals feel what EOS is. We've got kind of quarterly updates. You got your weekly meetings that all kind of feed up into the company quarterly and annual and 3-year goals, right? And so allowed, even since the addition of our new COO, allowed the leadership team to have oversight on everything that's happening in the organization. And as much as people don't like the word scorecard in many terms and places, it is good to at least have a pulse on the organization. That's what EOS did for us. Now, I'm not an expert on EOS. I've just kind of followed the implementation steps, but we were all mandated. I think I have the book on my bookshelf over there. What the heck is EOS? It's a good starting place for that. I don't know if you've gone through the process yourself as well, have you?
Yeah, I'm actually an EOS coach. So yeah, we do.
Hopefully I'm saying all the right things.
It's not about the right and wrong. It's about taking those steps forward, right? But no, you're absolutely right. And even to the point where, and one of the things I like about process, and there is a fear, and it's a legit fear. So let's talk about how it's always been, because sometimes people are afraid of too much process, and there is such a thing.
Oh yeah.
But there's also such a thing as too little process, and sadly, that's where most businesses err, especially small business. Larger businesses, you can get lost in the minutia, but it's finding that fine line of balance. So process is an important thing. Also, what's important and often underlooked is buffering. And what I mean by buffering is the whole distribution of roles. So I loved how you said it, because you want your C-suite, you want the big bosses having some type of oversight to quickly get a sense of pulse of where the organization is at. But what you don't want is them getting up in everybody's business on a day-to-day level. So this is why, by having, say your project managers managing teams, if there's anything wrong, then the middle managers talk to the project manager instead of interrupting the workflow of the teams. And all of this type of stuff is what we are talking about by creating your work culture, or in today's terms, remote work culture. So how can you maintain that communication? How can you maintain that schedule, those processes, and make sure that you're working effectively? Again, I said I wouldn't give any more shout outs to teamwork, but It's a wonderful tool for that. I mean, seriously, when you're evaluating tools, do they have the ability to create templates out of the things you're doing on a day-to-day basis? Are you able to create recurring tasks? If the answer is no, then stop using that tool and get a better one. Because it's all these little time-saving things. There's a great analogy I use in our training programs. I don't know if you've ever heard of Cadbury Thins over in Ireland there. Is that familiar?
Vaguely, but remind me.
Okay, so Cadbury Thins were introduced in Canada as this 100-calorie tiny little chocolate bar. And the way it was marketed on television was you had a bunch of women going, "Ooh, I can have one every day." And they were beautiful, they were thin, and the chocolate bar sold really well for a year or so. What ends up happening though is if you actually do the math of 100 calories times 365 days, that's 10 pounds of fat. So all of these women were suddenly not so happy about the safe little chocolate bar. So I use that analogy in reverse. When we're talking about systems, when we're talking about efficiencies, I'm not going to come to you and say, yes, absolutely, a tool like Teamwork or Asana or any of these tools is instantly going to save you hours every single day. What it's going to do is save you this much. And then that will collectively add up over time and grow exponentially as your organization scales. And that's what it's about. It's about how do you do things efficiently. So even right now, I imagine a lot of people are realizing working from home just how much time they were potentially wasting in the workspace. Because now we just want to get it done and move on to the next thing, right? Go play with your son.
Yeah.
And oh no, he's on YouTube right now. So the Zoom call is going to, crap out. So I need to get this done. So I have to be focused and efficient.
Yeah.
So I actually think this is causing us to become better workers in some ways.
I do.
Have you found that for yourself?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned kind of earlier there about silver bullet, right? And I think a lot of people want to be the silver bullet. A lot of people want to find the silver bullet. Believe me, if there was one silver bullet, we'd all know about it, right? But I think it's about adapting your process to a silver bullet for you, right? And your organization. I think you said it quite nicely and really understanding exactly what you can do and where you can get the value from any product, any use case, any workflow that's out there. But it is important, back to the EOS thing, that you have something in place, right? You have a process in place. Yes, we all know that processes can be, some people don't like documenting them, writing them down, creating them, but it is important that you create one and you follow one, whatever tool, even if you're using paper to take notes like I am right now.
Yeah. Yeah, so. I mean, and it's actually even funny you mentioned that, because you're aware that we do some small business mentoring programs. It's called the Limitless Results Mentoring Programs. And where we start people, because not everyone's technology is friendly, right? Not everyone gets it. There's a lot of people in the workplace that, even figuring out how to click a Zoom link and have that open and automatically download. What do I do now?
Yeah.
So there's still a barrier of entry to technology. So we introduce in our programs a paper-based CRM. And we don't even call it that, but we just get people starting to track stuff. And then we introduce the idea of KPIs and metrics. And then eventually we start to show them how to monitor conversion ratios and closing ratios. And we slowly introduce these processes and systems and eventually transition them from a paper CRM into a digital CRM. And it's an almost painless experience, because now they at least understand the concepts, they understand the data, the fear of numbers has gone away. And so it's just smoothing them into the technology. But there's so many people, even people I've interviewed to work with us, you show them a CRM and it's just completely and utterly overwhelming, because it's just a lot to take in at once if you've never used one before. So yeah, I agree with you. Do whatever you have to do, even if it's just jotting down tick marks on a piece of paper for the number of people you called today.
Yeah,
right? And
especially in the time of today where we've been forced into this, right? Nobody asked to be remote workers. Now, I think you said it earlier. I can't remember if it was before we started the call, but people like you and me have been advocates for remote working for a very long time, right? I'm a big, massive advocate. Before I joined Teamwork, I loved remote working. I worked in remote environments, but it's not for everybody, right? And so we find yourself in this new situation. Anything that can just get you through your work is what's important. And I really like that idea, the paper-based CRM. That's an interesting one.
You can appropriate it. Absolutely. Not a problem.
Very good.
Because yeah, I mean, it's making the process as easy as possible. And yeah, here's the thing though, this is where, and this is a confession of self. So How To Project was based on the idea of exotic remote working. Being trapped in my house all day, every day
Yeah,
is
you wanted
not
to be somewhere
exotic.
else. Yeah.
Yeah, like I used to be able to break it up because I'll still do some of the sales calls. I do mostly now a lot of live events, and I enjoy live events. We've worked on some together. I enjoy that kind of thing, and all of that's gone. So even though, yeah, remote work is we have the systems in place, we have the processes in place, and we're doing really well with it. As a person, as an individual, I really want to get outside again. So I understand where people are coming from, and I don't want it to seem soapboxish or condescending that, yes, we've been doing this for years. Welcome to our world. It's not about that. It's about all of us are going through things that are uncomfortable. But the good news is there are people that have gotten through the major chunks of it before. So leverage them. Don't feel like you have to understand how to do it all yourself, right? Like I can promise you right now, I know Ryan, and there's going to be contact info posted on the YouTube of this after for how to get in touch with Teamwork, or how to talk to somebody if you want to get started, or how to go get a free trial. I'm going to put all that stuff in there. I promise you, you will be supported every step of the way if you choose to reach out. Right? That's the Teamwork I know. I mean, why would I have worked with them for 12 years if I didn't understand how those relationships support one another?
Yeah, and I think it's important, and you did mention it earlier about kind of we've built our business on supporting people with humans, right? So we're probably one of the very few businesses that you contact. We don't use bots. You get in touch with a real human within 10 minutes, whether you send us an email or you call in. It'll be even quicker if you dial in, actually. But we've kind of made a commitment in this time. There's a video that we can share around afterwards from our CTO, kind of making a commitment to all of our customers, all of our future potential customers, that we will help in any way, shape, or fashion. So, and even myself, I do our live, some of our live weekly webinars for new potential customers, and I've offered my own personal time to kind of help in any way possible, right? And in no way is it about selling Teamwork, right? It's just about helping people. Even a couple of weeks ago, I experimented with just a virtual coffee to my whole LinkedIn network, and the outpour of people that booked time in my calendar, just 15-minute, no agenda. Some of it was old people I haven't connected with in years. Some of it was people I never even met physically before, and we were just connected on LinkedIn. So I think it's really great that we're still managing to keep a community together. I think that's going to be incredibly important to get us through, unfortunately, probably what's to come, or even worse to come. Not to catastrophize, but
So on a funny aside, I did tell you in our meeting earlier this week, our checkup meeting, because again, process is important. So we have a monthly check-in with each other. And when you shared that virtual coffee idea, I told you I was going to appropriate it. I did. I've already had 19 coffee meetings booked in 2 days. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And I was very clear, it's no agenda, no sell, just let's get caught up and connect.
It's interesting. Sorry, to kind of cross you. I don't know if you've seen this yourself, but I've committed to no sells. But the conversations that have come back to me have not necessarily been no sells in some scenarios, which is interesting. I don't know if you've probably had more calls than I have with 19. It'd be interesting to kind of see that now that people have open access to your calendar, if it comes the other way around, which of course is fine, right? I love a good pitch every now and then too, but I think it's funny to see that as well.
Yeah, well, and I will keep you posted. I actually set it to start next week, so people are pre for next week because there's a lot going on right now. So I will keep you posted for sure. But yeah, I mean, and I'm okay with that. I mean, my LinkedIn. I mean, we talk about selling. I have no problem with ethical selling in the best of times. I definitely have no problem with ethical selling in the worst of times. This is how we keep the world going. This is how we keep ourselves going and supporting each other. But yeah, I mean, my LinkedIn has been exploding with just people I've never met, not even on my list, that just reach out. And it's not about even reaching out, nurturing a relationship, and then eventually introducing me to the idea of their product or service. I'm getting blind pitches through text on LinkedIn. And I'm like, Wow. And I actually take the time to reply and say, has this ever actually worked for you? Because I'm always interested in what the metrics are. Because who does that? You know, like who
Yeah.
sells a service to somebody that they've never met and it's in text. So there's no context, there's none of this. And you know, what are you doing? Hitting 10,000 people, hoping to get your 100 sales quota? Like it's insane. And so I'm
Yeah.
not about that. I've also seen a lot, and I understand it. Like there's the two reactions. There's that fear and panic of the world is ending and my job is no longer there, so I need to figure out something else. And then there's people, of course, not taking it seriously enough. And what has caused me concern, so for example, we're classified as business management consultants or project managers.
Hmm.
And what I'm seeing is suddenly everybody and their brother has become a business coach or a business mentor, or hey, I can help you with that, because we're desperate to make money, we're desperate to survive. And in some ways, we're actually doing more lasting damage because we don't necessarily possess the qualifications and expertise. We're just doing what we can because we've had some experience with it. And it's more focused on self than focused on others. And I loved what you said. A hashtag we've been using a lot is global community, right?
Hmm.
And connected. We love that because more than anything, what I've seen from humanity through this is kindness, is generosity, and is people using social media as social media, like using
Hmm.
it for what it was originally intended for, not just sharing cat videos, right? But yeah, like how's it been where you are? I mean, I'm over in Canada, North America.
Hmm.
You're in Ireland. What's it like being over there right now?
Yeah, look, actually, when things kind of really went down here in Ireland, I was actually over in Australia on a business trip. So race to get home. So pretty much every business that's not essential is closed. Working remotely if you can, and that's like I think grocery stores and pharmacies are open. So we closed our doors to on-site workers, I believe 3 weeks ago. I think 3 weeks ago tomorrow. Um, and we kind of made the quick decision to do that, even though at that time I don't believe the government had made us do it. But we've got 100. I think we normally have about 25% of our staff work remotely, and about 170, 180 of our staff do work in our Cork offices across 3 different buildings. And we thought it was very important to just I mean, at the end of the day, we're software, we're knowledge workers, we work behind a computer. We're in that lucky boat that we can work from home. So take that opportunity and just go with it. Yes, not everybody has an office. Some people are working from their bedrooms. Some people are trying to work from their kitchen tables with kids running around, and my heart pours out to them. But we made that decision early because we're fortunate enough to have been able to do that. That's not to say that it was easy. And I know we were talking about this before the call. We
Mhm.
were we were rushed from 20 or 25 to 30% remote workers to 100% remote, right? So what's interesting to see, even those of us, and what I can talk to is myself alone, and some of those of us who did work remotely, like some of the guys that work out of Amsterdam or Barcelona or out in the middle of Australia, for example, they all work remote and they're used to it. But it's still different, right? I mean, I said it at the top of the call. My wife and kid are home. It's a different environment to work in. It's also, let's be honest, it's hard to stay focused, right? In this time, not because somebody's not looking over your shoulder, but because there's stuff going on in the world, right? And I think for me, it's been important to be real about what's going on, focus on the work that matters, and helping people, and really kind of shifting back into that, people first and business second. And I read that in a article posted on Forbes last week, so I'm not claiming ownership over that, but I do think it's really important to put the people first. And so we've done that with all of our employees. We've done that with all of our employees' families to make sure everybody's in an environment introducing flexible working. So like you no longer have to be online from 9 to 5, especially if you have family situations and things to work with. So it's been a challenge. It's still a challenge, right? I think we've talked about like the peaks and troughs of it, right? The first week is like all panic. The second week is like, oh, I think I could get used to this. And then the third week is like, oh, reality sets in. There's 7 things I forgot about because I didn't follow my process. I didn't document those things, or I didn't have my manager over my shoulder to kind of tap on my shoulder and remind me like he normally does on a Friday morning, for example, right? The things you don't notice that are there. So it's been challenging, but we've managed. We just had our Q1 recap meeting, which we normally do in person and live stream to the rest of our staff, we did it on Zoom. Zoom, I think we used the webinar functionality. So interestingly enough, it worked. People
That's
could
cool.
communicate, people could ask questions. It's actually easier to ask questions because now they're all written down instead of some people in the audience and some people typing them in. So interesting to see how we adapt, but it's been okay so far because we had the processes and the tools in place prior to it.
Right. Well, and it's even little things like what you just said. So in a platform like Zoom, and I know other ones, we were talking about Livestorm and Crowdcast, there's this option when you're recording like we are now, is that if you do have a Q&A session or you do have chat, you could actually have all of that saved and downloaded as a text file. Mm-hmm. Nice and easy. So no one has to really keep track of anything. It's then boom, up it
no
goes.
Meeting minutes. Yeah.
Up it goes into teamwork and away you go. And yeah, I mean, I'm getting it too. Like my wife and I, we have a shared home office, right? And that works for us in normal times because I'm not always there. She's not always there. She goes into the office once or twice a week. I'm out and about whenever. So the two of us being there, well, clearly you can see who won that debate, and I'm now in the living room.
I see.
But that's how it goes, right? You have to make adjustments and be flexible. And yeah, again, as you're scaling your teams, I mean, being able, how long did it take you guys to go from that 25% at home to 100% at home? Was that a long process, quick process? Like how quick as a company that has not just the tools, but the EOS process in place, was that relatively easy for you guys?
Well, to answer the first question from how long, it was pretty much overnight, right? So I think we announced it 3 weeks ago tomorrow. Closed the doors of the office. There were a couple people who were allowed in because they just had no working space at home, which obviously abided by their social distancing and all that kind of stuff. But it was overnight, right? I mean, one evening they said, this is the last day we'll be in the office. We've made this decision. And then each team is probably impacted in different ways. I mean, a lot of our development teams already are kind of hybrid remote teams anyways. For those of us on the sales org, right? Partnership sits in our sales org at the moment. We primarily, the majority of our staff are in Cork. So, we've got a team of SDRs, this team of SMB sales reps and large account sales reps, and they were all in the same place, bar the guy in Australia and two new hires we've just hired out of Boston. So that's definitely been a challenge. But again, for each manager, they've had to kind of figure out how to manage it. Luckily, we already had soft phones, right? Could you imagine operating a call, a place where you take inbound calls and you didn't have soft phones, right? So that was lucky. That's not our own software, but we had the tools and the processes in place between our own tools, things like Zoom, things like Gmail, to keep us kind of up and running. So the first week, which luckily I wasn't there for, I was still figuring out how to get home from Australia. I wasn't around for, but it's been interesting. We've kind of just slotted right back into it. Individuals are having, figuring out how to manage their own schedules and everything. But luckily, my situation, I've been able to kind of stick to the core hours and slot right into it because I do have the office and the space and
right,
everything,
And I think that's been a big challenge. We've actually talked about it a few times, not on a company level, but on an individual level, is the change in the home dynamic. We were talking with, first of all, there's just an overload, at least here, on just systems. Like our internet has been getting slower and slower because more and more people are consuming than what the services can provide bandwidth wise.
Yeah.
Reliably. And it seems to be getting worse as we get deeper into this. At the same time, I mean, you talk about kids. I was talking with my brother-in-law the other day. He's got 4 daughters and he's now working from home, and he doesn't work from home. So he can't say, stop watching YouTube on, 3 different iPads and a TV all day, but that really eats up the bandwidth. So his frustration is he's constantly dropping from Zoom calls, with work collaboration. Yeah. And so, emotions run a little high at times. But it's about, go ahead.
Sorry. I keep cutting across you. It's interesting you say that because I think 2 things come to mind when you say that. Obviously, communication is important, but massive thing for remote working for me anyways is asynchronous. tasks and communication, right? So not everything can be done asynchronously. And I mean sending an email and waiting a day for somebody to reply, or setting a deadline on a task or a due date on a task, right? If we're talking about teamwork. So asynchronous tasks really help you get over that bandwidth issue, because it doesn't take much to press complete on a task. The other thing is, I mean, I think I'm lucky enough over here to have fiber directly to the home. We're actually, our infrastructure in Ireland is pretty strong, even though across Europe they've kind of reduced streaming services and quality. But yeah, it's an interesting one, because you wouldn't even think about the speed of your network as a normal person, unless you're a nerd like you or me. And you know, getting into that space, so people are wondering, why is it Zoom, is it me, and it's very difficult. So one suggestion maybe to your brother-in-law, you said it was, asynchronous for the win, right? The things that you can do offline and disconnect, right?
Well, and I'll come back around to that, because you're preaching to the choir. But yeah, getting nerdy for a minute. I mean, you know, my house, we're wired a 1.5 terabyte fiber up down, and we're still seeing slowdown. That's how clogged it is here.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a lot going on. Now, to be fair, I think we have a few more people than in your area. Even though it's dedicated to the line, it's just the overall system at some point can only take so much. Of course, one of the things I did, and this may be over some people's heads, may not. If it is, feel free to reach out to me in this video and I will personally help you through it. One of the first things I did is hopped on my MacBook, opened up some diagnostics, and did a sniff for what channel is my Wi-Fi on. Because it turned out most of the neighbors are all on the same channel. So I'm getting a lot of noise in my signal, right? So something as simple as switching the channel over to one nobody's using, it cleared up a lot of the hiccups I was having the first few days at home. And it's these little nerdy things that make us so wonderful. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, reach out to me. And if you are nerdy and it's just something you hadn't thought of, go check your Wi-Fi channel and
Good idea.
Yeah. Back to talking about, you know, asynchronous tasks. There's a whole rant I go on, and I got a couple of minutes with you still. So I actually talk about Newtonian time versus Einstein time.
Okay.
I like asynchronous as well versus synchronous. So Newtonian time is the construct of time we have: 365 days in a year, 24 hours in a day, 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute. So when I say 9 o'clock Eastern time for a meeting, you can figure out exactly when 9 o'clock Eastern time is for a meeting. And we all have tasks like that. Like, I couldn't just randomly show up for this call with you whenever I got to it, because it doesn't work. But at the same time, there's Einstein time, and the theory of Einstein, his biggest, most known one, is relativity. So you can actually create time. So when you're scheduling out your day, instead of saying things like, you know, let's talk sales, because you're in sales. So instead of 9 to 10, I'm going to do, you know, new lead generation sales. It's be like, no, I'm going to spend an hour in the morning on sales. Does it matter if it's 9 to 10? No. Does it matter if it's 11 to 12? Nope, I'm just going to do it in the morning. And you're right, that frees up a lot of workflow and higher efficiency, frees up a lot of stress, which again makes you a little more focused and lighthearted about the whole situation. So that's something I've been preaching for years now. And it actually is a funny touch point about teamwork, believe it or not. One of my favorite things, don't ever let them change it. One of my favorite things about teamwork is, if you ever noticed when you assign a task, what you said earlier, there's a start date and there's a due date, but there's no due time. And the reason for that, and I preach this to people all the time, is if you're working on something the day it's due, it's already late. So you don't even need a due time. Like, I don't want to be assigned a task at 10 a.m. that's due for 2 p.m. that same day, because that means we've had a failure in process. Right?
Yeah.
So I love that about teamwork. And there actually are tools out there, I won't mention anyone, but there are tools out there that allow you to assign a due time. And I don't understand anymore in this day and age why there's so much micromanaging to that level. Like you talked about, flexible work hours. We've been that way for years. I don't care when you work. Like, we're all around the globe. So clearly we're not going to have the same schedule. As long as stuff's getting done, as long as the time's being tracked so we can measure our efficiency, knock yourself out. Like, you want to be up at 2 a.m.? Go ahead. I've actually done that. Been up at 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You're 5 hours ahead of me usually. I've reached out to support about something I found. And yeah, within minutes, there's a response. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Come on. Like, someone has to sleep. Right?
Well, it's
So
funny. We did to support that. We moved to 24/7 support at the end of Q4 last year, and it was primarily because we've seen a lot of expansion happen over in Australia, which is 12 hours in front of us. But it's also helped us with some of our West Coast customers as well in the US. So it is interesting to see that, right? That you need the time is the most important thing. The due time thing is a bit weird. I've always been a fan of blocking time. So kind of like your idea of like, I'm going to spend an hour in the morning. Um, but for me, it's like, just have a look at the calendar, drag something in there just to do it at that time, because I like to be structured. Background in military school and all that stuff was really, it just, that's kind of who I am. But some people like the assigning tasks and having a due date, but I never heard of due time. So that's probably something we'll never introduce. I
yes.
hope.
Yeah, it is out there. Well, and here's the thing, back to our earlier point, circling around, it's whatever works for you. Because you talked about it. Some people are great at working from home, right? I
Mhm,
know a lot of
mhm.
the introverts in the world right now are just celebrating because they're like, yay, we finally get to be us. Right? And then there's other people that, even if they're introverted, that was just a funny, that just don't work well at home. They don't. They get distracted by too many things to do, because home is your comfort place away from work. So mixing the two can be really
Yeah.
challenging. So at the end of the day, it's finding what works for you, really.
And have you actually heard of, and you may have, but maybe your listeners haven't, the Pomodoro Technique?
I
Um,
actually haven't. Okay.
so it's a
Educate.
great it's a great one for people who have trouble, say, blocking time or staying focused. And I'm definitely going to mess this up, so we can link to it later. But it's like 25 minutes of solid focus time and a 5-minute break.
Okay.
And literally the break is leaving the workspace, right? So focus on something for 25 minutes, set yourself a timer, Google Pomodoro timer, and you'll find one. And then you take the break, and I think it's every 3 segments or 4 segments of that, you then take a longer break, like a half hour or an hour. And it really helped me get into that kind of rhythm, like a circadian rhythm of workflow, to make sure that you're focused but balancing it with the break, because it is really easy, if you don't have distractions at home, to never get distracted and to burn
Right.
out in the span of a week or 2 weeks. I used to be in an environment where it was in Ireland. I was living on my own at the time and didn't have anybody in the house to come home and say, "Hey, it's 6 o'clock, it's 7 o'clock, it's dinner time," right? To let you know that the day is over. And I would find myself very quickly working 12-hour days. Great for the short term to get stuff done. Really, really not good for the long term. So the Pomodoro technique really helped me kind of get out of that and set a more time-bound, structured day.
Agreed. And actually, I have to thank you, because it turns out I'm familiar with the explanation, did not know the term. So perfect. Now I can
Very
talk
good.
to it with authority. Yay. Um, but you're also right. I like what you said, because we've talked about how it's important to have the systems and the processes for doing remote work culture. I keep using the phrase work culture because it's not just about remote work. And part of that culture, of course, whether you're on site or remote, is taking care of your employees, taking care of your people. So when I block out my day, for example, myself personally, I mean, it starts with gratitude. It starts with meditation. There's always at least an hour to work out in the day. It doesn't matter when it is, but I take care of myself. There's time to actually have fun, because for my personality type, fun is important on a daily basis. So I need to have some fun. I even book out time to eat, because, it's amazing how we can forget to do that.
Forget to have lunch.
Right. And it's so critical, especially because we are working from home. Like you said, to wake up at 7 a.m., sit down in front of your computer, and then you look at the clock and it's 10 p.m. and that's all you did all day. It's not healthy for the company you're working with. It's not healthy for your relationships. It's not healthy for yourself. So yeah, I agree with these types of approaches to block out your day, whether it's doing it, set hours or a relative number of hours,
Mhm.
taking the breaks. Is it Pomodoro effect? Is that what it's called? So
Pomodoro technique, yeah.
Pomodoro technique. So leveraging that to make sure that you're resting. I actually have an eye chart in the office that's about 15 feet away. So every 20 minutes or so, I'll just step back, look over, let my eyes refocus to,
They say
maintain.
that you definitely should do that. Yeah, that's something I don't do. Maybe I'll try.
There you go. Right. But yeah, it's really just about taking a breath. It's not the end of the world. This isn't something new. There's people out there to support you. There's systems out there to support you. Not everyone's going to be okay. I'm not going to lie to you. but many of us are going to be okay if we continue to reach out and support each other. Like you said, people first. And that concept has been around long before any of this. I mean, if we're honest with ourselves as entrepreneurs, as business owners, that's why we got into business in the first place, was to serve other people with something we discovered that changed our lives. So I think we'll wrap it up there, my friend. Thank you so much for your time today. I always enjoy our conversations.
Yeah.
This was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to getting those links. I'll add them to the YouTube video, etc. And as always, let me know if there's anything I can do to serve you, our special guests, to serve you, our attendees and audience members that watch this later. Stay home, stay safe, and yeah, just remember to stay connected.
And stay sane as well. I think that's how I've been ending my webinars as well. Just make sure you keep the right head on, and it's not all about remaining focused and writing your next novel. So it's okay to stay sane.
I think I'm actually going to add that, because that makes perfect sense to me.
Very
All
good.
right,
Thanks so much for your time, Marcus. Really appreciate that.
You as well.